Mr. Bolton, how are you feeling?
Hey, Mr. Bolton, Mike Pence is being snared in a conspiracy to defraud the country. Where's Abby Lowe? What are you doing, sir? Feeling pretty good?
That was former National Security Advisor John Bolton leaving federal court this morning without answering questions from reporters, as you saw right there. He pleaded not guilty to 18 charges relating to unlawful mishandling of classified information. The Trump advisor turned adversary's arraignment lasted less than 20 minutes, and the judge told Bolton that he faces up to 10 years in prison if he's convicted.
Boy. So we got to follow up on what I believe to be one of the most significant stories of this week involving the Trump deranged former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who got slapped with some indictments, okay, from a grand jury when it comes to his mishandling of classified information. Again, the irony of John Bolton, okay, who has been very critical of people like President Trump, of others when it comes to handling classified information. This guy is getting busted for doing the exact same thing he criticized others of doing, right? Of being reckless, okay? And what I find to be so hilarious about what's happening to John Bolton, outside of the fact that, again, this is kind of karma, right? What comes around goes around, okay? Is the fact that this dude is clearly and obviously guilty, right? I mean, this is a pretty tight case, okay, that the Justice Department has brought against John Bolton. And it's just funny because the mainstream liberal media, their legal analysts are basically admitting this out loud, right? Without outright saying it. But when you listen to him and you listen to how John Bolton basically screwed himself with his own words, with his own statements, yeah, I think everybody kind of knows that this guy is probably going to prison.
John Bolton was very subdued. We used to seeing him here in the green room, and obviously he's always very friendly to reporters. I tried to talk to him when he got to the courthouse, and he was all business. And obviously these are very serious charges that he's facing, and you mentioned the amount of time that he could receive if he is convicted of all these 18 counts. And he was very respectful to the judge, obviously, in responding, yes, sir, yes, I do. But one of the interesting things about this case is the political aspect of this, obviously. And you've heard, obviously, from Bolton's attorneys and from him his own statement yesterday that he believes he's being targeted selectively by the Trump administration because of his criticism of the president. And there is something that I think a lot of us, really noticed in this indictment yesterday. There was a reference begins on page 19 of the 26-page indictment, where prosecutors mentioned that Bolton himself in media interviews criticize Pete Hegseth and other national security officials in the Trump administration for their use of signal to discuss an ongoing military operation in Yemen. And they use that essentially to show that Bolton himself was aware of the implications of using an unsecure platform to discuss very sensitive information. But one of the things about that is interesting. It was almost like it was not a necessary thing for prosecutors to include in this indictment, Pamela. But it is not the last time we're likely to hear about this, because we know that the defense wants to make this issue, the issue of selective prosecution, part of their defense. And I suspect that this Signalgate controversy is going to become part of the talking points going forward. This is a case that's not going to try for some time because of the national security information that is involved in the case. Pamela.
So you're saying that basically the defense would then argue, look at this, you're making your own case how this is selective prosecution because you're acknowledging that classified information was mishandled in this other way, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know prosecutors at DOJ, we know FBI officials inside the FBI have been very concerned that they've not been asked or allowed to investigate the Signalgate issue, because they know that there were national security information that was being shared on an insecure manner. As a matter of fact, the reference in the indictment says, in an interview, Bolton discussed the damage to national security by using a non-governmental communication channel. That is the words of prosecutors from the Maryland U.S. Attorney's Office in that indictment against Bolton.
Which I find to be hilarious, right? Because that's clearly and obviously a troll, right? Because basically what they're saying is that, hey, John Bolton went on CNN and gave his expertise about how, you should not mishandle classified documents and sensitive information. So this dude knew full well what he was doing, right? When he ended up doing what he criticizes others for doing. He's an expert in how to avoid this type of stuff. And the fact that he was engaged in it, again, it just makes him more guilty, right? So without further ado, let's react to Elie Honig, school Jake Tapper on why is it that John Bolton here is facing an uphill battle when it comes to his defense.
Your legal analyst, Elie Honig. Elie, now that we've seen this indictment, how serious do these charges seem to you?
Well, Jake, if prosecutors can prove these charges, that's always the big if, then John Bolton's conduct, to me, is more serious, certainly than we saw in the investigations of Hillary Clinton, of Mike Pence, of Joe Biden, and even more serious than the conduct that got Donald Trump indicted. Let me tell you why.
Wow.
First of all, John Bolton didn't just mishandle this information. He didn't just keep it in a box in a garage or even scattered around a resort. He actively disseminated it to two people, according to the indictment, two family members who were outsiders, who had no security clearance over AOL, which, by the way, was hacked. Second of all, we're talking about the highest level security. The indictment talks about information relating to military attack plans, to missile launches, to foreign leaders, to sensitive sources and methods. And third of all, Bolton's team was not exactly forthcoming about this. There came a point where they learned his email had been hacked by Iran. They notified the FBI, but they omitted the fact that John Bolton was using that account to communicate with these outsiders. So I think if DOJ can prove this, this is big, big trouble for John Bolton.
When President Trump was indicted on federal charges relating to mishandling classified documents in 2022, Bolton said this.
In most offices, you would have a very clear segregation of the sensitive classified material locked in safes, handled very carefully, versus all the unclassified material. This, to me, is more evidence that Donald Trump didn't give much attention to the sensitivity of the classified information.
The indictment contains numerous comments like that by Bolton about other people, including I believe, although the indictment doesn't mention them, it says like public official 1, public official 2, but I believe Hillary Clinton and Pete Hegseth are also criticized. How relevant is that? Why are the prosecutors including those statements in the indictment?
So that's absolutely legally relevant. That's not just intended to rub it in Bolton's face or to show that he's a hypocrite. That's intended to show his criminal intent, because when you have charges like this relating to mishandling or disseminating sensitive classified information, prosecutors have to prove that he acted willfully, meaning he knew he did it. It wasn't just by accident, and also that he knew it was illegal. And those statements by John Bolton make out a very clear case that he, of all people, understood how sensitive this information was and what the law required. So that's going to be an absolutely relevant part of the prosecution's case here.
Yeah, he's cooked, right? He's cooked. And that's the hilarious part about it, right? Because all of that smack talking on national television, right, about Trump, all of that Trump derangement is part of the reason why the case against him is so strong, right? It's because, yes, it is hard to prove intent. But when you are somebody who goes on national television as a national security expert and you're lecturing other people on how they're supposed to handle classified information or how they're not supposed to handle classified information, that strongly suggests that you know, right, how this works, and that what you did was not a mistake, and that you were 100% aware that what you were doing was criminal, right? You were aware of it and you did it anyways. This dude's cooked. Right? He's cooked. He's going to prison. He's going to prison, I'm telling you. He is cooked. Okay? He's done.
So obviously, in just the last 3 weeks, we've seen a number of Trump opponents, Trump critics, indicted. We saw the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, with alleged fraud having to do with mortgage. We saw the same thing happen to James Comey, the former FBI director, when it comes to statements he made to Congress that prosecutors allege were false. Do you see this indictment in the same frame, another Trump opponent indicted?
I don't, Jake. I see this as different. There's no question there's longstanding bad blood both ways between Donald Trump and John Bolton. John Bolton also will be able to make a motion to dismiss based on selective or vindictive prosecution. But I see a couple distinguishing factors. One, Donald Trump in contrast to Letitia James and Jim Comey, Donald Trump did not take to social media and explicitly order the attorney general to indict them. Bolton was not part of that social media post. But more importantly, Jake, the reporting is, and the indictment seems to reflect, this investigation predates the current Trump administration. And if that's the case, if it goes back to the prior Biden administration, I think that's really going to undermine any malicious prosecution claim that John Bolton has. Also, I should add, the charges here against John Bolton are vastly more serious than the charges that have been made against Jim Comey and Letitia James. So I see this as separate and apart from those.
Wow.
But his attorney, Abby Lowell, says this was already known to the FBI in 2021, and this had already basically been litigated. You don't think that that's true?
Yeah, I'm not sure where Abby is basing that. I mean, look, in 2021, if Abby Lowell is referring to the incident where John Bolton's emails got hacked by Iran and Bolton's team then contacted the FBI and told them about it, fine. But what he's leaving out of it is that they did not tell the FBI the key details, which was that John Bolton had long been writing down pages upon pages of sensitive information and then emailing it over AOL to these two outsiders. That's what really makes this indictment important. And if they left that out when they contacted the FBI, then no, that was not properly resolved.
All right, Elie Honig, thanks so much. Appreciate your insights. Much.
Yeah. I'm not sure if CNN actually really appreciate that insight, because I'm certain that's not what they wanted to hear. Right? They definitely didn't want to hear that. But based on what I'm hearing, yeah, John Bolton is cooked, right? He's cooked, okay? He's going to jail. He's going to prison for sure, right? This is the strongest one. I think Shifty Schiff is next. And these Democrats are learning, and these never-Trumpers are learning, right, that nobody's above the law, right? John Bolton thought he could get away because the Biden administration said that, hey, we're not going to look in this. You're a useful tool. You go on national television. You talk trash about Trump. So we're not going to go after you, right? But, you know, hey, again, nobody's above the law, okay? Everybody has to be held accountable, and Democrats are finding out the hard way. Even the media, right, their legal analysts can't say that this is a weak case or that this is not legitimate. Even they know this guy is done. That what he did was inexcusable and extremely stupid, especially for a dude that his whole career has been national security. He goes on TV and criticizes people for mishandling classified information, and turns out he was doing that. Every accusation is a confession from these people every single time. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.